You often speak about the tools that we each have in our toolbox. On your spiritual journey, which of the tools in your toolbox have you found the most helpful and why? One of the concepts that I talk about a lot is how we move through the world with our own toolbox. And that toolbox is how we respond to the world. So let's say that you get yourself into a situation where compassion is required, or resilience is required, or patience is required, or understanding is required. Well, if in your personal toolbox you don't have patience, you don't have understanding, you don't have compassion, then you're not going to be able to respond to that situation with it. Because usually what happens in our world is people hurt us. Not intentionally, not meaning to hurt us, but they do it because they're not able to respond to that situation skillfully. So let's say that I'm walking through a situation and I see this nail sticking out of the wall. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to pull a hammer out and hammer it. Or I'm going to call someone and say, get a hammer and hammer that nail back in. But if I open up the toolbox and there is no hammer, and all I've got in my toolbox is a paintbrush or a fork, well, I'm not going to be able to do proper justice to that nail. I'm going to whack it with a paintbrush. I'm going to whack it with a fork. Now, if the nail were a living being, if the nail were one of us, it would feel like, who the hell are you? What are you doing? Don't you understand I'm a nail? What I need is a hammer. Why are you whacking me? Without understanding that, yeah, we'd love to hammer the nail back in, we just don't have a hammer. And this is a metaphor that I use, and it's the foundation for the question of when people hurt us in life. There's so many times in our life when what we need from someone is understanding, or we need patience, or we need compassion. But the people in our lives respond with impatience, or they respond with anger, or they respond without understanding. And then we get hurt. But we blame them for that without understanding that they didn't wake up in the morning planning to hurt us. They didn't wake up in the morning planning to make a mess of that situation. They're just moving through the world with a toolbox. And when the situation required love or generosity or openness or understanding, they opened up their toolbox and they didn't have any. What they had was fear, anger, loneliness, unfulfilled expectation, grudges. And so that's all they have to respond to the world with. And our toolbox gets created throughout our lives. It begins in our childhood. Our parents give us the first tools. So if we're raised with patience, we're raised with understanding, we're raised with generosity, we develop tools of patience and generosity. But if we're raised with impatience, we're raised in the every man for himself model of life, we're raised with abuse, then we don't end up with tools of love and generosity in our toolbox, and we don't have them then to respond to others with. So that's the foundation of this question, which was, on your spiritual journey, which of the tools in your toolbox have you found most helpful and why? On a personal level, for me, I think the tool that was most beneficial for me and has been for most of my life has been the knowledge, the deep, deep, deep awareness that I deserve, I'm entitled to. Last night we spoke about privilege, how life is a privilege. I was really raised with the belief, the knowledge, that I was entitled to a happy life, a good life, good things in life. It's the way my parents raised me. You can do anything, be anyone, have anything, achieve anything. I was raised to believe the world is good. When I was very, very young, my mom used to take me to this place near our house that had this huge slide. Enormous, enormous slide, but she, of course, was too scared to go down it with me. And so she'd grab any random guy going up the stairs and she'd say, "Would you take my daughter down the slide?" I was maybe 3, 4, 5 at the time. Now, today, people would look at you like you're crazy. People would, try to get you arrested for child endangerment, to just hand off your toddler girl into the hands of some unknown male stranger. But my mom had this, still has this very deep, deep belief in the goodness of people. And so it never occurred to her that anything would happen to me. She used to teach me, strangers are just friends we haven't met yet. That was the motto that I was raised with. And so that combined a faith in people around, in the goodness of people, and faith in the universe, that the universe was good, that you were entitled to good things, that there always would be enough. I was not raised with fear. I was raised with a sense of plenty. And what that did for me in my life was enabled me on my spiritual journey, because that's what the question asks, is on your journey, which of the tools? Well, if I didn't have faith in the universe, if I didn't have faith in the goodness of the universe, the rightness of the universe, I think it would have been very difficult at 25 to leave the world that I came from, to leave a path that I knew was going to take me into financial success, career success, for a spiritual life. To walk out of a world in which everything is set for you on a physical, tangible level, and to walk into a place where you don't speak the language, you don't know anybody, you don't know anything about the culture. You have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. You have no idea how long they're going to let you stay here. When I first moved here, Parmarth had a 15-day maximum policy. Right? I mean, we still do on paper. You've 15-day maximum. You've actually still got to get special permission. It's granted if you're a sincere sadhak, but you've got to get special permission to stay more than 15 days. So if I had been raised with fear, what's going to happen to me? Where's my next meal going to come from? Who's going to put the roof over my head? What's going to happen? It would have been very difficult to take that step in faith with what I had experienced, and to have faith in the people, to have faith in the world, to have all of that faith. So I think that was probably the most beneficial tool. The other one, though, that I would mention is a deep commitment to truth. In my home growing up, telling a lie was the absolute worst sin you could commit. You could have done something horrible, but if you admitted it, the punishment would be almost nothing. And on the flip side, you could have done almost nothing, but if you lied about it, There was hell to pay in my house. You didn't lie. And you didn't lie even about little things. There was no such thing as a white lie in my house. And so I was really raised with this truth at all costs belief. I remember actually my last year in high school. I was 17 and I had fallen in love. First love. To me, we were soulmates and we were going to be together forever. It was just, you know what first love is like when you're a teenager. But he was a year older than I was. And he was going off to college the next year. And I remember having dinner with my dad, and he said to me, so Eric's going off to college next year. What are the two of you going to do? And I said, oh, well, we're going to stay together, of course, because we're soulmates. Of course, we have to be together. We're soulmates. I said, but we're going to have an open relationship. And my dad, now I have to back up for a moment. My dad is a divorce attorney, a very successful divorce attorney. The man spends all day long, morning till evening, divorcing people. And he's done that for decades and decades and decades. And so all he hears all day long are the fights of husbands and wives who are getting divorced. Okay, so he's now sitting at the table with his 17-year-old daughter who's telling him that we're going to stay together because we're soulmates, but we're going to have an open relationship. And my dad says to me, what does that mean? And I said, well, Dad, in that voice like, what century were you born in? I said, it means we will be free to date other people because he's going to be far away. We'll be free to date other people, but we will be totally honest about it. We're going to tell each other everything. And we're going to stay together, of course, because we are soulmates. So my dad, in really what now, 30 years later, I still think he deserves an award for how to parent a teenager, says to me, he says, so let me get this straight. He says, you're going to date other people, tell each other about it, and then stay together. And I said, well, yes, of course. And he says, not, what are you, an idiot? Not, I've spent my life getting couples divorced. This is the stuff divorces are made of. He looks at me and he says, well, that sounds very interesting. I look forward to hearing how that works out for you. And I share that story, not just to highlight how wonderful my dad was, but because this is the commitment to truth that I was raised with, of truth will supersede everything. Yes, we have to date other people because we are far away. Yes, we will stay together because we are soulmates. And of course we will tell each other about it because I could not imagine in my life there being any reason, any acceptable situation in which the truth would not be the right thing to do. As ridiculous as it sounds in retrospect, the idea of we're going to date other people and then report to each other about it. But in my idealistic truth at all costs youth, the truth had to lead only to goodness. You could not have a relationship with anyone that wasn't rooted in 100% truth. I knew it would hurt. I wasn't stupid. I knew it wasn't going to be fun to hear. But the truth conquers all. Truth was God. So truth had to be told. And I would say that that's the second and very, very powerful tool that I was given, because then, again, when I had this experience on the banks of Ganga, when I knew that this was where I was meant to be, there was no way I could not live it. People say to me, God, it's amazing that you decided to stay. It's amazing that you left that world. It's amazing that you came here. But for me, there actually was no option. I could not deny the truth that I had seen. I could not deny what I had experienced. It didn't come in the package that I thought my life's happiness was going to come in. I mean, I was on a path. I was getting a PhD in psychology. I was going to live a normal life. House, a white picket fence, kids, a career, vacations at resorts. I mean, all the things that you think a good life is made of. I was not expecting that the package of the happiness of my life was going to come in renunciation, in celibacy, in spirituality, in an ashram in India. But when it happened, when I had that awareness, when I had that opening, because truth was the biggest tool in my toolbox, it was the only thing, every time I opened my toolbox, what stared me in the face was truth. There was no way I could deny that I'd had that experience. There was no way I could turn my back on it and say, I didn't see that. And so that commitment to truth led me here. And it's been interesting, actually, because in India, what I've realized is a different definition of truth. And a definition that takes aspects other than just truth into consideration. So, for example, one of the things that comes up so frequently for people here is, well, that's not true, or this isn't true, and how easily people in this country will tell you things that they think you want to hear. They think it's nicer to tell you something that makes you happy in the moment than that what may necessarily be the truth. And then I learned that in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna gives a beautiful teaching on tapas of speech, the right speech, spiritual speech, dharmic speech. And what he tells us is it actually must fulfill 3 criteria. It must be true. He's not condoning white lies. It must be true. But it must also be kind and beneficial. And what that means is that there are times when silence is the highest virtue. Where in my truth at all costs, it may hurt, but it's the truth, so you need to hear it, so I need to speak it. Believe that was a little bit short-sighted. That there's a package that truth comes in order for it to be dharmic speech. And just being true isn't enough. We must always ask ourselves, is it also kind? Is it also beneficial? And of course, he doesn't say 2 out of 3 is enough. This is 100% or nothing rule. So it's not enough to be kind and beneficial but not true. But it's also not enough to be true without being kind and beneficial. So that awareness of truth has actually expanded and grown and shifted for me. but it's still a very, very core aspect for me of the spiritual path.